The views and opinions expressed in the following program are not necessarily those of Open Sky Radio. Please be advised.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to The Fire You Can't Put Out. With you again. Hello, my name is Melvin. I want to thank you for joining me. So today we are taping on Wednesday, October 16th of 2013. Today is officially day 16 of the government shutdown, and it is the last possible moment when we can fix this situation, because the government has been unfunded for the last number of weeks now, and ever since October 1st. And coming up on the 17th, if the debt ceiling is not raised, it'll be the first time in 225 years that the United States of America has defaulted on its debt. Let me start by saying this. My name is Melvin Mausoleum. I am an American. Born, fed, watered, bred in the United States of America. I know we've got some listeners outside of America, probably quite a few. Thank you, World Wide Web. One more thing created by the government. And I like to think that I, on this show, am your peek into how an American, or how many Americans feel. Now, certainly, I get on this microphone every week, and I give you my opinion. But I like to think that I give you a lot of opinion from, say, my side of the aisle, but I also try to give you a peek into what the other side is thinking. I understand that it's biased because of, who I am, where I sit. But I want to say this. I am absolutely ashamed. But I'm not ashamed of our government. Government is like anything else. It is the sum of its parts. If somebody says, I hate the government, government's bad, fine. Go find this gentleman or woman that you call government and fire that one person. That's not the way it works. See, government is made up of hundreds of legislators, and then there's the judicial, and then there's the executive, and then there's all the people that work underneath them. It's made of a ton of people. So if you put terrible, awful, bad people in charge of the government, especially if you put people in charge of the government, they say they hate it and they want to see it die. Don't be surprised when it comes close to dying, or if it actually dies. Back in 1979, the Republicans tried to use the debt ceiling as a bargaining chip. And simply getting close to the debt ceiling that year caused billions of dollars worth of damage. Even though they didn't actually hit it, it caused billions of dollars worth of damage. Back in 2010 or 2011, I think it was 2010, when the Republicans flirted again, using it as a bargaining chip, that they were going to not raise the debt ceiling. And by the way, I'll explain this in a minute. It doesn't add money to the debt. It's complicated. I'll simplify it as much as I can. Back then when they flirted with it, it again cost billions of dollars, which does absolutely nothing. It's really just money down the toilet. And for the first time ever, our credit was downgraded. This time, on the eve of default, at 9 o'clock tonight, Western, which is, of course, midnight Eastern, Thursday morning, they don't raise the debt ceiling, at the very least, and hopefully reopen the government. Economists are saying it will absolutely be catastrophic for the economy. It will destroy the U.S. economy, and it will throw us into another recession. We are the reserve currency for the world. We are where other countries put their money when they need to stash money because they have political or economic unrest in their countries. And we are no longer that light in the world anymore. And it's not because that's what we wanted to do. It's because back in 2010, the United States of America, the voters in some of the deep red southern states decided to send what we now call teabaggers to the Congress. This isn't the Democrats. This isn't the Republicans. And that's the first time. That's the only time you'll ever hear me say that, I'm fairly certain, because it's always one or the other. This whole both sides, it's crap. It's always one side or the other. Someone is causing it. Someone is bringing it forth. Somebody. And it's not both sides. Because if it were both sides, then that would be an agreement. And there's obviously a fight because there's a disagreement. It's always one side. But this time, it's not both sides. The Democrats want the government reopened. Most of the Republicans want the government reopened. It's only the teabaggers that don't want it reopened. So after many failed talks, the president gave a speech last week. He held a news conference where he took questions and he was very open and candid about what is happening with the debt ceiling. He says, I want to read a couple of quotes. Except somewhere along the way, House Republicans decided that they wouldn't appoint people to the committee to try to negotiate. And 19 times they've rejected that. Here's the thing. On March 23rd, the Democrats had a budget passed in the Senate, okay? And by the way, one of the favorite talking points of the right is that the Senate has never passed a budget. An obvious lie, right? So this year, they passed the budget because the fiscal year in America goes October to September. So the Senate passed theirs on March 23rd, and they sent it over to the House. The House said, well, obviously we need to reconcile it in committee, so we'll get together, we'll reconcile, we'll work out the differences. And then for the next number of months leading up to now, the Republicans refused every single time to get together and reconcile that bill. For months, no. They waited until the government was just about to shut down in late September, and they said, okay, now we'll meet with you. And then what? Well, then they're working against a clock that is racing downward. And with that, the government shut down. And they go, well, it's because of the Democrats. They can't do anything right. It's because of the Senate. No, it's not. It's because of you, John Boehner. So even after all that, the Democrats in the Senate still passed a budget that effectively reflects Republican priorities at Republican budget levels just to keep the government open, and the House Republicans couldn't do that either. These were the Republican spending levels that were inside that bill that the Senate sent over. And the Republicans still said, nope, we want to kill Obamacare. And guess what? We're not going to pay our bills. And I'm quoting from here on. Now, as soon as Congress votes to reopen the government, it's also got to vote to meet our country's commitments, pay our bills, raise the debt ceiling, because as reckless as a government shutdown is, the economic shutdown caused by America defaulting would be dramatically worse. Still quoting. And I want to talk about this for a minute, because even though people can see and feel the effects of a government shutdown, because they're already experiencing it now, there are still some people out there who don't believe that default is a real thing. And we've been hearing that from some Republicans in Congress, that default would be no big deal. So let me explain this. If Congress refuses to raise what's called the debt ceiling, America would not be able to meet all of our financial obligations for the first time in 225 years. And it's because it's called the debt ceiling. I think a lot of Americans think it's raising our debt. It's not raising our debt. This does not add a dime to our debt. It simply says you pay for what Congress has already authorized America to purchase, whether that's the greatest military in the world or veterans benefits or Social Security. Whatever it is, it's that Congress has already authorized. What this does is make sure we can pay those bills. It's really that simple. Now back to quoting. Now, the last time the Tea Party Republicans flirted with the idea of default 2 years ago, markets plunged, business and consumer confidence plunged, America's credit rating was downgraded for the first time, and a decision to actually go through with it, to actually permit default, according to many CEOs and economists, would be, and I'm quoting here, insane, catastrophic, chaos. These are some of the more polite words, unquote. He lays it out really simple for the American people. And quite a few people still don't get it. I've seen quite a few discussions on blogs, web pages, all the rest. And really that stuff is just back and forth talking points, unfortunately. One more from the press conference on October 8th. In an economic shutdown, every American could see their 401ks and home values fall. Borrowing costs for mortgages and student loans would rise, and there would be a significant risk of a very deep recession at a time when we're still climbing our way out of the worst recession in our lifetimes, unquote. So Obama invited the Republicans again to the White House. So here's the story. President Obama is inviting members of the House and Senate from both parties to meetings at the White House this week, because this is last week. Okay. His goal, of course, is to encourage Congress to end the government shutdown and avoid a debt limit default. The president is started his meetings on October 9th, okay, meeting with the full House Democratic caucus, but when he invited the Republicans, they couldn't bring themselves to accept his offer without tying themselves in knot. A couple of things from the Republicans. Boehner's office, I know it's Boehner, who cares, said Wednesday that the GOP leader would send a small group to Obama's meeting on Thursday, but not the full invited caucus. Truly. But Boehner spokesman Brendan Buck said that the meeting was only worthwhile if it was focused on finding a solution. So Buck said only the elected leadership and a select committee chairman will attend. 18 lawmakers out of the 232 invited. So the Republicans say, well, the president won't meet with us. Well, he won't talk to us. It's very important for us to reopen the government. And yet, they're invited to the White House and they go, nah, are you going to give in to our demands or what? No, we would like to talk. Well, then we're not going to send anybody. I really think you should send somebody because we need to end this BS. That's me talking, obviously. And they say, well, we'll send a couple. Because they don't care. They're hoping that this will all fall back on the president. Okay? Okay, so Paul Ryan says, well, maybe we can talk if we can take away women's contraception. What? Yeah, this is a real thing. This really happened. This coming from Washington Post. According to the Washington Post, in a private meeting with House Republicans, Representative Paul Ryan, Republican from Wisconsin, who earlier this week floated a compromise that would raise the debt ceiling in exchange for cuts to entitlement programs, railed against emerging Senate proposals and argued that the House could not accept either a debt limit bill or government funding measure that would delay the next fight until the new year. According to two Republicans familiar with the exchange, Ryan argued that the House would need those deadlines as leverage. Your lives, I'm not quoting now, your lives are leverage to the Republicans in the House. That's what they think of you. As leverage for delaying the healthcare law's individual mandate and adding a conscience clause allowing employers and insurers to opt out of birth control coverage if they find it objectionable on moral or religious grounds, and mentioned tax and entitlement goals Ryan had focused on in a recent op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. That's right. Hey, you want us to fund the government? By the way, the House holds all the purse strings. They spend all the money. You want us to pay for what we passed? You want us to fund the government that we've been... Okay, well, you need to let us do something bad to the ladies. So then there's Boehner. Boehner was on, let's see, all right, bear with me for a minute. So Speaker of the House, John Boehner, comments on his latest efforts to increase the debt ceiling and the government shutdown using the usual Republican mantra. This comes to us from SamuelWard.com, quoting from Boehner. We've been trying to have conversations with our Democrat colleagues. They don't want to talk. The president doesn't want to talk, unquote. Notice how he says Democrat colleagues. This is politics, obviously, and this is the way we sometimes talk. When he says Democrat colleagues, it's not Democrat, it's Democratic, right? Just like his name is Boehner, it's not Boehner. It's very disrespectful for me to call him Boehner, Boehner, when his name is Boehner, and he's doing the same thing, saying the Democrat colleagues, they say Democrat colleagues because they want to emphasize the rat in the word Democratic, okay? Once again, this coming from Samuel Ward. Dear Speaker of the House, I seem to recall that rather than proposing Medicare for all and then perhaps compromising on a health care reform package with a strong public option, Obama began a health care plan modeled on Republican proposals originally set out by Bob Dole and implemented by Mitt Romney in Massachusetts. Okay? You can't say he won't talk to us. He's been giving you these Republican things. Back to the article. I seem to recall Obamacare being funded by the individual mandate, a plan created by the Republican Party back in 1993 as a response to President Clinton's attempt to overhaul the existing healthcare system. This was a Republican plan. I seem to recall Obamacare being funded by the individual mandate, a plan created by the Republican Party in 1993. Okay? I seem to recall over 190 Republican amendments to Obamacare. Yeah, there's things in Obamacare that they put in. I seem to recall President Obama dropping his election year promise of a single-payer option to appease Republicans, a concession that other Democrats strenuously objected to. I personally, Melvin, also objected to that. Okay, I seem to recall then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi pulling together a majority consensus to pass the ACA by a normal House vote of 219 to 212. I seem to recall President Obama reaffirming the Hyde Act by way of an executive order to facilitate that vote. See, they've been given lots of things, and they're saying, oh, what? You ain't giving us anything. Really? Because we wanted an expansion of Medicare, dropping the eligibility age to 0, or giving us a public option. It could have been a one-page bill, giving us a public option. That's it. Or dropping the eligibility age of Medicare to 0. That's it. But instead, we got this monster-sized bill, and then you guys took that monster-sized bill and they go, look at this stack of papers. Who even understands this? I know Republicans can't understand it because, well, you know, reading. So, who's to blame? Who does America think is to blame? Well, the president's numbers have ticked down a bit, which is crazy because he can't shut down the government. He doesn't hold the purse strings. Okay? The legislative passes the laws. The House funds the laws. The executive enforces the laws. The president doesn't spend the money. It's spent by Congress, more specifically the House. So their numbers are going through the floor, not the House. Well, the Congress as a whole is sitting at 5%. 5% of people right now agree with Congress. Okay, 5% think, oh, Congress is doing a good job. My. But the numbers, the poll numbers for Republicans have been absolutely precipitous. The Democratic Party's favorable ratings currently sit at 43%, and the Republican currently sits at 28%. On graphs, which you can find over at HuffPo and some of these others, okay, Republicans had pulled up even to Democrats in 2010 at 41 and 42%. Okay, for Republicans and Democrats respectively. That was the year of the Republican wave. Now the gaps look as bad for Republicans as they did during the Democratic wave years in 2006 and 2008. Recently, the Republicans' unfavorable ratings have skyrocketed. The Democrats sit at 49% unfavorable, which essentially splits their unfavorable opinion. The Republicans' unfavorable ratings is at 62. I've seen some of these numbers as high as 70. The big difference is that in 2006 and 2008, the Democratic Party was above 50% in favorability. At 43% favorability, Dems only look good in comparison, but that's what elections are. Comparisons between two parties. And right now, the bulk of Americans are laying the blame and laying it thick on the GOP, and rightfully so. All right, so where are we at? The Republicans have just made history in negative polling. That was Gallup. This is the NBC News Wall Street Journal poll. By a 22-point margin, 53 to 31%, the public blames the Republican Party more for the shutdown than President Obama, a wider margin of blame for the GOP than the party received during the poll during the last shutdown in 1995 and 1996. You may remember that they shut it down at that time. That was Newt Gingrich shut it down because he felt shited by Clinton. Just 24% of respondents have a favorable opinion about the GOP, and only 21% have a favorable view of the Tea Party. That's right, teabaggers, you're going down. Not that you were ever really up or sane. Yet, what is perhaps even more worrisome for the GOP is the boomerang effect, as the party has used the shutdown and fiscal fight to campaign against the nation's health care law and for limited government. The poll shows that those efforts have backfired. Okay? For one thing, the health care law has become more popular since the shutdown began. 38% see the ACA or Obamacare as a good idea versus 43% who see it as a bad idea, up from 31% good idea and 44% bad idea just last month. In addition, 50% say they oppose totally eliminating funding for the law. That's fully half. It's a much larger number than 5%. Even if that means a partial shutdown of the government, that's up from 46% who said they opposed that move in September 2013. 78% of the country, according to this poll, says the country is moving in the wrong direction, and they pretty much all blame the Republicans. So nobody's listening. No one in the government, no one in the House certainly is listening. It's been weighing down pretty heavily on the Republicans, and yet they just keep going. They think that they've got a winning strategy on their hands. Why? Because, well, they've told you that getting health care is a bad thing. They're doing all this because they simply don't want you to have health care. I've mentioned it before, and I'll mention it again. When Medicare came out, they called it European-like, Russia-like socialism. Right? Same thing with Social Security. It's socialism. It's going to destroy America. And now they're saying Obamacare is socialism. It's going to destroy America. So you know what that means? That means that Obamacare is awesome. And that's why they don't want it. I'll say it to your face. So the national parks have been closed. And the Republicans have been protesting, why'd you close the national parks? Well, because they're part of the federal government. Well, the Republicans have other plans for the national parks. The GOP, by the way, this comes from Daily Kos, J.L. Finch over at Daily Kos. The GOP would have Americans believe that they value our national parks and are outraged that the parks are closed, even though they voted for the government shutdown. That's me saying that, by the way. A powerful Republican chairman in the House of Representatives just shared with his constituents his desire to begin selling our national parks. Representative Cliff Stearns of Florida, who was caught on video in a local town meeting. Here's what he said. I got attacked in a previous town meeting for not supporting another national park in this country, a 200-mile trailway. And I told the man that we don't need any more national parks in this country. We actually need to sell off some of our national parks. He's not alone, though. Some of our current candidates for leader of the free world have also mused about putting America's national heritage on the chopping block. And the House of Representatives has actually passed or considered favorably a series of radical bills in this Congress that amount to an all-out war on the concept of holding public lands in trust for future generations. Last fall, Jason Chaffetz, Republican from Utah, proposed selling off 3.3 million acres of public lands that belong to all of us. And former Representative Richard Pombo proposed selling national parks to mining companies in 2005. Mitt Romney, as you may remember, told the Reno Gazette-Journal that he doesn't know what the purpose of public lands is. Rick Santorum told Idahoans that public lands should go back to the hands of the private sector, and Ron Paul advocated for public lands to be turned over to the states. Guess that's not as bad. Back to the article. Since 2010, Congress has cut the parks budget by 13%, leading to seasonal closure of national parks, including the Great Smoky Mountains and the Grand Canyon. The GOP would love nothing better than to sell off or give away our national parks to the cronies and campaign contributors for drilling, condos, clear-cutting, strip mining, or whatever. file this under hashtag National Parks Hypocrisy. More on that later. So, a clean CR bill, or a clean continuing resolution as it's called, came up several times in the House. And every time, Boehner said no. Absolutely not. No. We're not releasing the hostage. So Alan Grayson, who's one of my favorites, this comes to us from HuffPo, Jennifer Bendery over there. The House had a pretty light schedule on Saturday morning. This is this past Saturday. Passed a funding bill for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the Bureau of Indian Education, and Indian Health Services, but Republicans yanked the bill immediately after it came up as Representative Alan Grayson, Democrat from Florida, tried to amend its title with language calling for an end to the government shutdown. Here's the bill's official title: Making Continuing Appropriations for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the Bureau of Indian Education, and the Indian Health Service for fiscal year 2014 and for other purposes, unquote. Under Grayson's amendment, the title would have an extra clause about what a great idea it would be to pass a clean funding bill. Making continuing appropriations for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the Bureau of Indian Education, and the Indian Health Service for fiscal year 2014 and for other purposes, although we prefer and would support a comprehensive, clean, continuing resolution to the end of the government shutdown, unquote. Whew! The name of the bill doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, just to say. Grayson's goal was pretty symbolic. He wanted to see how many Republicans would vote for the idea of passing a clean funding bill to reopen the government with no strings attached. His confidence that his amendment would pass stems from the fact that at least 24 Republicans have said that they would support a clean funding bill to end the shutdown, which along with all Democrats means they'd be able to do it. And Grayson stepped up again. During a speech on the House floor to call for a vote on a resolution that said Congress' dignity had been impugned by the government shutdown, Grayson frustrated Speaker pro tempore Steve Womack by obstructing all other business and asserting privilege under Rule 9. Grayson observed that the media outlets all over the world and polling data within the United States showed that the dignity, quote, that the dignity of the House had been called into question, unquote. The Florida Democrat pointed to a public policy polling survey. I'm going to interject real. I love PPP, by the way. That's a busy studio for you. All right, sorry about that. So he pointed to the PPP poll, the public policy polling, that found that Congress had an 8% approval rating. And to infuriate Republicans further, he read out each of the items that the American people found more likable than Congress. What do you have a higher opinion of, Congress or witches? Well, Congress 32%, witches 46%. He said, what do you have a higher opinion of, Congress or hemorrhoids? Congress 31%, hemorrhoids 53%. What do you have a higher opinion of, Congress or dog poop? Congress 40%, dog poop 47%. At that point, Womack shut him down. But the congressman continued citing the poll, comparing Congress to toenail fungus, cockroaches, and zombies. At times like this, and they are really tough times, they really are. It's painful as a citizen to see our government in this state, but it's nice when somebody can bring a bit of humor to it while also still making a very valid and very poignant point. So we talked last week about the big truckers' ride for the Constitution. They're just going to ride in on the 11th, right? They're going to block up the Beltway in D.C. with their trucks. They're going to arrest the president. They're going to ride for the Constitution. Well, that kind of happened. It would appear the so-called truckers' ride for the Constitution has been about as successful as the open carry march on Washington planned by Adam Kokesh on July 4th. You will remember that Kokesh promised thousands would be there to stand for their right to bear arms. But when that day came, Kokesh himself showed up and made sure that he was in a location where he was unlikely to encounter law enforcement. Well, the truckers' ride seems to be going just about the same way. They had predicted thousands, and apparently only dozens showed up. Earlier that day, Virginia State Police stopped 4 trucks in Fairfax County for driving abreast of one another on the Beltway, blocking all 4 northbound lanes and driving 15 miles per hour. They were warned not to impede traffic and released without a warning. The organizers had predicted that 10,000 trucks would arrive to circle the Beltway and create a rolling blockade for the next 3 days. But only a handful had checked in at the staging area where they were to meet to coordinate the event. They have a Facebook page. I followed their Facebook page. They had a list of several demands, including cessation of the NSA surveillance activities, freezing the debt ceiling, and the resignation of the president, who they claim is not a citizen. They threatened that if he refused to resign, they would demand law enforcement officers do their job and arrest him. They were complaining about low fuel prices, or they wanted lower fuel prices. And they wanted higher wages. Funny, because they all seem to be conservative, and those things kind of go in the opposite direction if you put conservatives in charge. Because it is right now the conservatives who are trying to eliminate the minimum wage right now, so that employers can pay you whatever menial wage they want. And I go on. I can tell you that these drivers know that if a truck is not moving and carrying a load, then you're not making any money. So they're kind of defeating their own purpose. It's also, and even though they said they weren't going to break the law, driving 15 miles per hour on any state anywhere in America is against the law. But there was more fire this weekend on Sunday. So so 2 days later, that was the Truckers' Ride for the Constitution was on the 11th, and then on the 13th, the Tea Partiers decided to bring Confederate flags to the White House. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not sure if they know this. They are Tea Partiers, so they're kind of short on everything. But I wonder if they know that there's a black family living in the White House. Maybe, maybe not. They showed up with Confederate flags. The so-called nonpartisan Million Vet March garnered support from key Republicans who strolled over from the Values Voter Summit. Rick Santorum, Alan West. So let's be clear. This is a Tea Party rally. Ted Cruz, Sarah Palin, really all the usual suspects. Nonpartisan, indeed. We've seen this before. Old, angry white people descended on D.C. just after America's first black president was sworn in. Can you imagine being President Barack Obama, and while glancing out the window of the White House, seeing a Confederate flag and all the misspelled signs? For the record, black slaves helped build the White House. John from America Blog reports, according to CNN, the Tea Party protesters gathered at the White House are also very concerned that President Obama is a Muslim. One speaker went so far as to say the president was a Muslim and separately urged a crowd of hundreds to initiate a peaceful uprising. I call upon all of you to wage a second American nonviolent revolution, to use civil disobedience, and to demand that this president leave town, to get up, to put the Koran down, to get up off his knees, and to figuratively come out with his hands up, said Larry Klayman of Freedom Watch, a conservative political advocacy group. Ted Cruz spoke, protesting the government shutdown, which he, in fact, caused. Over on Breitbart, when it came to the Confederate flag, Breitbart.com said, "Way to go!" They took the gates that were around the World War II memorial. They drug them over to the White House while waving their Confederate flags, and they threw the gates at the White House. The police at that time, who were not being paid, then had to take the gates and haul them back over. So the Tea Partiers, shutting down the government, ruining our credibility around the world, not wanting to pay our bills, just causing all kinds of ruckus, and they're a teeny tiny group of cockroaches. They really are. But they're funded by billionaires. Billionaires that fund groups like Americans for Prosperity and FreedomWorks, who, by the way, is in quite a bit of financial trouble. Sources told BuzzFeed that FreedomWorks was forced to take out a $1 million line of credit to keep extra cash on hand earlier this year. The so-called, I'm saying that, nonprofit organization raised more than $40 million last year, but has taken in as little as $3 million so far this year. Wah, wah, wah. The site reported Friday that staffers are reportedly fleeing the group as morale plummets. The group had fallen on hard times since co-chairman Dick Armey tried to gain control of FreedomWorks in September 2012 from top executives Matt Kibbe and Adam Brandon. Armey agreed to drop his coup attempt and leave the organization in exchange for $8 million that will be paid over 20 years by FreedomWorks, primary donor, Chicago businessman Dick Stevenson. The former Republican House Majority Leader had been with the group since its 2004 inception as a splinter group of the Koch brothers funded Citizens for a Sound Economy, which Armey had joined the year before as chairman. Two sources with a close knowledge of the organization's finances told BuzzFeed that FreedomWorks had raised less than $2 million in the first quarter of 2013, although a former employee said it may have raised as much as $10 million so far this year. They also questioned giving $1 million to Glenn Beck to prop up his website, The Blaze. And, of course, a spokeswoman for FreedomWorks dismissed the claims and said, really, those are just disgruntled ex-employees. Who's really listening to them? So, another hot weekend in D.C. and in America and really around the world because of what America is threatening to do at this moment. And this, anytime there's this kind of heat, it brings up talk of, largely from conservative areas, talk of secession. And this week was no exception. On October 12th, Scott Strizelchek is fed up with what he calls political slavery in Maryland and sees one way out, creating a breakaway state. Riding a wave of anti-government sentiment across the United States, the small-town information technology consultant has launched a long-shot bid to get Maryland's 5 conservative western counties to secede from the state, one of the most liberal and democratic in the country. We think we have irreconcilable differences and we just want an amicable divorce. We, the People Tea Party group in Carroll County, a county he hopes will be part of the split. Although it's not real likely to happen, he's not alone in saying this. His Western Maryland initiative is just one of several secession proposals that are emerging across the United States. Nearly a dozen rural Colorado counties have put non-binding secession referendums on their November ballots. A split-off proposal for Southern Florida has also been floated. What's causing this? People don't feel represented anymore, by and large, because we have a Congress not listening to what they say. I would argue that they are. These secession talks usually come from deep red states, and deep red states tend to send teabaggers to Congress, and teabaggers are who's shutting down the government. But I digress. A lot of people no longer feel represented, by and large, because of gerrymandering. Have you looked at the electoral maps as of late? They really are carved up with a scalpel to get every single teabagger into one district so that they have a nice, safe seat, and to put the Democrats in one district. The safest seats, quite honestly, are the Republicans. Republicans as well as Democrats have fueled secession efforts around the country by gerrymandering or manipulating the boundaries of legislative districts while empowered to bolster ruling party support and guarantee that those who oppose them are shut out. That's it. No dissent, no democracy. This often leaves people in these districts feeling stuck with politicians who do not represent their views. And it's happened everywhere around the country. So, with the government shutdown, childcare, Head Start, food stamps, all of these, a lot of this is because of the sequester. A lot of these things have been cut back already. So, this past weekend, what are called EBT cards started failing in 17 states. Some of them got limitless amounts of money on them, and then some got none. It was pretty insane. It's because a vendor called Xerox Corp is in charge of running those cards. And I say, people in Ohio, Michigan, and 15 other states found themselves unable to use their food stamp debit-style cards on Saturday after a routine check by Xerox Corp resulted in a system failure. Company spokeswoman Jennifer Wasmer said Saturday. While the system is now up and running, beneficiaries in the 17 affected states continue to experience connectivity issues to access their benefits. Beneficiaries requiring access to their benefits can work with their local retailers who can activate an emergency voucher system where available. We appreciate our clients' patience while we work through this. U.S. Department of Agriculture spokeswoman Courtney Rowe underscored that the outage is not related to the government shutdown and quite honestly said they should not be doing these kind of checks, especially during such a hot time. So I jumped over to Michelle Malkin's page, who's a conservative woman, and it really didn't take long for the right to start celebrating the fact that people may not get their benefits. Over on Michelle Malkin's Facebook page, it said, "Riot time, food stamp users in near panic over EBT card failures," and they were celebrating. I just want to read you some of the responses to people not being able to eat. Carla N. said, "Good. Was behind a guy this week trying to use it for a cart full of alcohol. He got mad when the clerk wouldn't let him and shoved the cart into the wall and stormed out. I thanked the clerk for following the law." She's lying, of course, because you can't use them for alcohol. You've never been able to use them for alcohol. Amy B. says, "Ha! Too bad, Obama voters." Amy, hungry people. What you're mad at is hungry people. Mike D. says, "How am I supposed to get my beer and Doritos? This is racist." My. Michael C. says, "Imagine what will happen once their free Obama phones start working." If you don't know what an Obama phone is, that's fine. It just means you're not a nitwit conservative. They don't exist. It's something completely made up on the right. Mindy B. says, "Well, it seems like the poop is going to hit the fan. You know how folk can be when they can't have their food stamps." And Donald W. says, "Perhaps they could panic enough to actually consider getting a job so they can pay for things themselves. I'm forever seeing Muslim-garbed women using food stamps. I just wish they'd go back home to their original countries." Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is your American right. I want to dig into some of the outrages. We try to cover a little bit of what's happening with guns. And this week was one of the biggest outrages we have seen in some time. Citizens of Newtown, Connecticut are weary of a gun group's drive to claim the one-year anniversary of the massacre at Sandy Hook Elementary as, and I'm not kidding here, this isn't an Onion story, they want to name it Guns Save Lives Day. It's a Second Amendment foundation group that wants to use the December 14th as a day to promote gun ownership. As far as I'm concerned, this is nonsense, said resident Linda Mana. It's very insensitive. It's despicable. It's reprehensible, said Monty Frank of the Newtown Action Alliance. As you may remember, December 14th is when Adam Lanza killed 20 children and 6 school personnel with a high-powered rifle. The Newtown Action Alliance is a group of Newtown residents and others who want to ensure that what happened at Sandy Hook never happens again. The Second Amendment Foundation's Gun Save Lives Day website claims that the group goal is to prevent misguided gun control laws and promote gun ownership as a means of maintaining public safety. Second Amendment Foundation founder Andy Gottlieb told NBC that he doesn't see anything wrong or offensive or insensitive about marking out the anniversary of the massacre as a pro-gun observance day. Gun Save Lives Day. The day that all those children were slaughtered. They want to make that Guns Save Lives Day. My. Maybe we could make March 29th, 2003, if I'm remembering that correctly, as the We Saved Iraq Day. Why not? We bombed tons of people. Why not? Few DMs. Joe the Plumber. Joel Wurzelbacher, more commonly known as Joe the Plumber, wants Americans to admit that they want a white Republican president again. Wanting a white Republican president doesn't make you racist, it just makes you American, Wurzelbacher wrote on the website The Black Sphere on October 10th. Wurzelbacher refers to the time before President Obama was elected when as the pre-black president era, saying at the time criticizing the president meant that you didn't like his policies. So what he's essentially saying is he wants a white Republican president, and he doesn't see that as racist. And he's saying that all conservatives, every time they criticize the president, they're called racist. Not true. They're only called racist if they say, show up on the White House steps with a Confederate flag, or carry a sign with the N-word, or if you go on any right-wing message board where the N-word is just flying like so many birds. Sorry, I couldn't think of anything better. That is what makes you racist. And so he says, it's not racist to want a white Republican president. Funny. I've never wished for a particular, I've wished for a gender. God, I've said, I wish we could have a woman president. But I never sat down and go, God, if we could only have a white president, you know why? Because that's racist. But they're kind of tone deaf to that kind of thing. Mostly the racists are. So some just want to be helpers. And Steve Pearce is no different. He has a suggestion for the hundreds of thousands of furloughed government workers worried about not being able to pay their bills. Take out a loan, he said. In a post on his personal Facebook page that was later deleted, Pearce urged government workers to call their banks and take out a short-term loan if money is tight. Progress Now, New Mexico, a nonprofit group that advocates progressive principles in the state, circulated a screenshot of Pearce's Facebook page on Facebook post on Friday before it was taken down. Pearce spokesman Eric Lair said a staffer, not the congressman, posted the comment. He says, hey, it wasn't me. His constituents are among some of the poorest in the country. So going to the bank to take out a quick signature loan is not an option. Yikes. Look, guys, just like this reminds me of like during the election when Mitt Romney goes, hey, just borrow the money. What? You want to go to college? Just borrow the money. From who? Oh, but millionaires will never understand us, and Pearce himself is a millionaire. So Hasselbeck is doing well over on Fox. Fox News' Elizabeth Hasselbeck on Thursday suggested that welfare recipients who had air conditioning and cell phones were part of the ugly side of entitlements. During Thursday's Fox and Friends, Hasselbeck plugged a report that Libertarian Fox Business host John Stossel is running this week that he claims will show how welfare creates a culture of dependency. Do these people really need to be on welfare? Stossel said. So he asked people on the street, do you have a TV? Yes, I have a TV, one woman says. Asked another man, yes, I have a television. Do you have air conditioning? Stossel presses. Yes, the man replies. Fox does this kind of thing all the time. And they say, you people have TVs, you have refrigerators, you have clothes, you have shoes, some of you have cars. You're doing fine. Which is not the measurement. They go, you have cell phones. You're doing just fine. You need to shut up. The motivation to get a job is almost non-existent in 35 states, Hasselbeck opined. Yeah, she's doing just fine over there on Fox, fitting right in. Two 16-year-old students are up in arms because school officials suspended the pair for wearing Confederate flags as clothing on the grounds of their high school. The students' reasoning? They don't see the Confederate flag as racist. I continue. The student's reasoning? A classmate wore a rainbow flag to school for the past 2 weeks in honor of LGBT History Month. So they said, we wore the Confederate flag because she was wearing a rainbow. And racism, right? Showing your racism is exactly the same, or defending racism is exactly the same as defending our gay brothers and sisters. It's exactly the same. This particular school that they're in said that they have banned the Confederate flag as a form of dress. They are allowed to have it on their cars and all the rest. And the boys said, well, hey, this is a free speech issue. No, it's not. I don't care what anyone says. The Confederate flag is flat out racist. So I want to get over to Russia for just a minute. Not literally. Putin is one of the most anti-gay leaders ever. They're stopping gay adoptions. They're trying to pass laws to take children away from their adoptive parents if their adoptive parents are gay. They've banned gay pride parades. They've banned openly talking about being gay. And so it is with no surprise that a gay rights rally in Russia ended with a lot of clashes and arrests. This is last week, St. Petersburg, Russia. A gay rights rally in St. Petersburg has ended in scuffles after several dozen protesters were confronted by about 200 conservative and religious activists. The police standing nearby waited until clashes broke out between the two groups before intervening. According to Russian news agencies, the police detained about 67 people from both sides. The scuffle started after anti-gay protesters tore a rainbow flag out of a woman's hands. I've seen the pictures of this. It's really sad. St. Petersburg city government had sanctioned the rally despite the Russian government's June passage of a contentious law outlawing gay propaganda. Gays in Russia have faced increasing pressure and threats of violence. St. Petersburg police could not be reached for comment. The Republican right, the religious right in America have been celebrating, absolutely celebrating how great it is that they're so anti-gay over there. Brian Brown, the president of anti-LGBT hate group, the National Organization for Marriage, is attempting to justify a secret trip to Russia to advise the Russian parliament, the Duma, on writing new LGBT laws. Brown and his organization have maintained a strict silence on the Russian visit, but on Friday, Right Wing Watch reported that Brown could potentially face sedition charges for lobbying against the interests of the United States government to a foreign power. Former Republican presidential candidate Fred Karger alleged in a letter to the Attorney General Eric Holder and Secretary of State John Kerry that Brown violated U.S. law by addressing the Duma. It is illegal for U.S. citizens to conduct private diplomacy with foreign governments against the interests of the United States. Brown, however, insisted that he was speaking extemporaneously to the Duma and that he was there at the behest of the anti-LGBT group, the World Congress of Families, an Illinois-based group dedicated to a worldwide ban on same-sex marriage. What a worthy cause. We will unite. We will defend our children their normal civil rights, Brown said to the Duma's committee. It's what a thing to devote your life to, you know? Hating gay people. And this guy, and if you get a chance to listen to right-wing radio at all, they're trying not to be too open about it, but it's an absolute love fest over there for Putin right now, and for all the anti-gay laws that they're passing and the anti-gay attitudes. I've listened to it. It's really terrible. And what a thing to devote your life to. Hating gay people. You're on the wrong side of history. Let's get to some good news. Arizona Governor Jan Brewer said Wednesday that she opposed the congressional Republican effort to defund Obamacare, saying that it would be a blow to the state's budget. That's right, Jan Brewer wants the Obamacare money. The bottom line is that we need the money, and I'm quoting, in our economy to save rural hospitals and jobs in the rural areas, Brewer said, according to the Arizona Daily Star. It's all about jobs and getting back federal tax dollars that our taxpayers have paid to the federal government to bring them home. Arizona is one of several Republican-led states to accept the law's Medicaid expansion. The federal government covers 100% of the cost of the expansion for the first 3 years and never less than 90% after that. The funding is unaffected by the shutdown, but it would presumably be lost if the GOP actually succeeded to push to defund the entire law. If the state didn't receive that money, Brewer said, we will be faced with calamity. You know, the one really great thing about this entire shutdown is they did it to shut down Obamacare. And the only thing they have not succeeded in doing is shutting down Obamacare. So, this brings me to my final thought. On the eve of collapse, and we are here on Wednesday, October 16th, facing an economic collapse, even if the House and Senate passed something right now, they have still done irreparable harm to the United States. with their obstruction. And all because they wanted to stop the president's health care law, which helps poor people. After the election of Obama, the Tea Partiers warned of a collapse, of economic calamity, catastrophe. When Obama announced, the wars became, he announced getting rid of the wars, and then that he said, I want to become president, I want to get rid of the wars, and then that quickly became health care. Now, on January 20th, the night of the election, a detailed account of who was present at a dinner on that night and the plan they worked out to bring down the Obama presidency. Now, we learned this from Robert Draper's book, Do Not Ask What Good We Do, Inside the U.S. House of Representatives. In his book, Draper opens up with the heady atmosphere in Washington on the days running up to the inauguration and the day itself, which attracted 1.8 million to the mall to witness Obama being sworn in as America's first black president. Those numbers contributed to a growing sense of unease among Republicans as much as the defeat in the White House race the previous November. The 15 Republicans were in a somber mood as they gathered at the Caucus Room restaurant in Washington, which is an upscale restaurant where a New York strip steak costs $51. Attending the dinner were White House members Eric Cantor, Jeb Hensarling, Pete Hoekstra, Dan Lundgren, Kevin McCarthy, Paul Ryan, yes, that Paul Ryan, and Pete Sessions. From the Senate were Tom Coburn, Bob Corker, Jim DeMint, John Ensign, and John Kyle. Others present were former House Speaker and future and failed presidential candidate Newt Gingrich and the Republican strategist Frank Luntz, who organized the dinner and even sent out the invitations. The dinner was set in a square at Luntz's request so that everyone could see one another talk freely. The session lasted 4 hours, but by the end the somber mood had lifted. They had conceived a plan that they would take back the House in November 2010, which they did, or use it as a spear to mortally wound Obama in 2011 and take back the Senate and White House in 2011, Draper writes. If you act like you're the minority, you're going to stay in the minority, said Kevin McCarthy, quoted by Draper. We got to challenge them on every single bill, challenge them on every single campaign. This was how they were going to bring down the presidency of Barack Obama. The very night he was being sworn in, while he was dancing with his wife at several of these balls, they were at the Caucus Room restaurant planning to bring down his presidency. Then came the 2010 elections. The teabaggers got the gains, right? Prior to 2010, there was talk of a government shutdown, okay? But over the last 2 years, that kind of talk has absolutely escalated. After the 2012 shellacking, okay, which was an election that was run on health care, the cons met again this past January, but this time they didn't let anybody know about it. Now, as I mentioned earlier, March 23rd of this year, the Senate passed a budget, okay? The cons said in the House that said we are absolutely not going to get together with you. And then when the government shutdown came up, they go, well, now the government's going to be shut down. You better give us everything we want. It's searchable. Over the last number of years, and Rachel Maddow did a great job on this a couple of weeks ago, you can just search Republican, just about any Republican's name, a government shutdown, and you'll come up with sometime in the last couple of years where they were quoted as saying, we want to shut down the United States economy. Okay? So once shutdown looked imminent, obviously they said, okay, fine, let's get together. The teabaggers warned us, okay? They said Obama is going to ruin the economy. When he didn't ruin it, the teabaggers decided that they were going to ruin it. But prior to the attacks of 2011, the intentions of Osama bin Laden were incredibly well known. And one of his op-eds eventually made it into the New York Times. And he hated America. By the way, he was trained by our CIA, okay, because we wanted him to put together Al-Qaeda to have these secret wars in Russia, okay? So bin Laden was trained by America. And when he got away from us, and he got away from us with all of our military training, well, he became our enemy. And he mentioned, and he wasn't shy about this, that what he wanted to do was to bring down the American economy. He wanted to crash the American economy. On October 11th, 2001, he almost succeeded in doing that. Okay, terrorists from his group flew planes into the Twin Towers. Killing 3,000 people was a bonus to him, but it wasn't his plan. It wasn't all he was looking for. What he really wanted was to bring down the United States economy. He wanted to crash our economy. He said, after a major attack, okay, I will throw up Al-Qaeda flags all over the world. And every time I throw up an Al-Qaeda flag, the United States will react and overreact. And they will send a military there. And then we'll throw a flag up over here. And then they'll send a military there. And then we'll throw a flag over here. And they'll send a military there. And before you know it, the United States will have run out of money. We will collapse the American economy. That was his big plan, because he knew the United States government was too big, too strong. He couldn't take on the United States government in hand-to-hand combat, because he knew he would lose. The strongest, most powerful, most well-financed military in the whole world. I think almost in every other country combined. You combine all their militaries and ours is still bigger. So he knew he couldn't take us down in hand-to-hand. But what he really wanted was to break the back of America. Break us financially. Take down the federal government. To destroy the federal government. Well, it's happening. Here. On October 16th, 2013, where no deal has been reached, and the debt ceiling for the first time in 225 years is not going to be raised. Why? Because the Tea Partiers want Obamacare shut down. Osama bin Laden thanks you. Of course, he's dead now, thanks to Obama, but he spent a long time trying to destroy the United States economy, trying to bring us down, and it never worked. He really should have simply joined the Tea Party, because they are doing now what he never could. It's not hyperbole to say that what has happened in Washington over the last number of weeks since October 1st, 2013, it's not hyperbole to say that it's terrorism, economic terrorism, brought to us by the United States Tea Party, a group of racist, uneducated nitwits walking around with poorly spelled signs and demanding the collapse of the United States economy. I've always said America is too strong, too resilient. We will never be brought down from within. Or we will never be brought down from without. Getting emotional here. We'll never be destroyed from without. We will only be destroyed from within. And on this day, with no deal having been reached in Washington, D.C., they've done it. They've finally done it. After 225 years, they have finally done it. The Tea Party is crashing the American economy. Al-Qaeda thanks you. But this host, this show, we do not. The eve of an economic collapse. And it was Pete Sessions that said, insurgency, referring to obstructing the government. Insurgency, we understand perhaps a little bit more because of the Taliban. And that is that they went about systematically understanding how to disrupt and change a person's entire processes. And these Taliban, I'm not trying to say the Republican Party is the Taliban. No, that's not what we're saying. I'm saying an example of how you go about is to change a person from their messaging to their operations to their frontline message. And we need to understand that insurgency. He called for a Taliban-like insurgency on January 20th, 2009, the night that the president was sworn in. It's not hyperbole to call them terrorists, because they are. Sorry to end on such a somber note, ladies and gentlemen. I hope next week to end on a much better one. Woo! Once again, I want to thank you for joining us here at The Fire You Can't Put Out. I certainly enjoy you spending this time with me every week. I look forward to joining you again next week, where I will be 1 year older and done with a half marathon. I want to thank Kevin, my producer, co-host, and all the rest for all his help. And Angela, who we hope to get back on the airwaves here, and Leo, and of course you fine folks out there for listening to this very program. I've been looking at the numbers of this program, and I'm so glad that you're there, because I really look forward to doing this every week. Stay strong. We are the fire you can't put out, and we will prevail. Good day, everybody.